Hello, Samantha Shannon, and
Hi.
welcome back to Waterstones.
Thanks, always lovely to be here.
Did you know you have the same birthday as Bram Stoker
I did know that actually, yes. He's my literary birthday guy.
and Kazuo Ishiguro? Gordon
Very
Ramsay
literary
as
day.
well.
Oh, Gordon Ramsay.
Bit less relevant, but
I mean, very relevant to me. I love Gordon Ramsay.
obviously we all know that star signs aren't real. Okay, good. Just testing the water, really.
Look, right now it was just Mercury in retrograde. For me, it was a bad time. So I believe fully at this point.
That was a lie before, I do believe it all. Do you ever take birthdays and star signs into account when you're writing your characters?
It depends. So with the Roots of Chaos series, the months and the calendar doesn't line up at all, so I can't really think about that. I guess in my mind I might think that certain characters have a vibe, but my Bone Season series is set in the real world, so I do know all the characters' star signs, and the main character is a Capricorn, and I think that really suits her.
A Capricorn is a great person to have as a main character.
Yes, yeah.
What preparation do you generally do for characters when you start? Like, do you have like a character profile, like a sort of basic kind of stuff? Does it go as far as like what's their favourite colour or like?
So I have a silly thing that I do, which is that I take my characters out for coffee, which is basically me going on my own with a laptop to a coffee shop and pretending that I'm interviewing them. So I come up with the basic idea for a character, like for one of my books, you know, I had a princess who was going to be living on a mountain and she wasn't going to know her real identity, but that was the only thing I knew about her. And then I started in my head interviewing her. So I was thinking, you know, who are you? What are your goals in life? What do you want? What's stopping you getting what you want? And that's how I start to build a character. And once I have enough of them that I can kind of get a sense of who they are, then I put them into the world and I see how they start responding. But that's also how I build worlds. I ask myself questions about the world, and I think it's a really good way to interrogate yourself, to force yourself to come up with answers, and then slowly your characters deepen and your world grows.
A lot of people like to reread a whole series before they go into the next instalment when there's something new coming out. But obviously this is a prequel
To the sequel.
to the sequel.
Yeah.
But a sequel to the prequel.
To the prequel, yeah.
So,
it's not confusing at all.
In terms of reading order, would you recommend somebody completely new to the series started with this, or do you think people that are familiar with the series should like go in chronological order or release order? Is it different for everyone?
I think it's different for everyone. So I have three basic approaches that I recommend. So one of them is publication order. I think this is probably the majority of people will go for publication order. They're just following the books as they release. Priory of the Orange Tree, A Day of Fallen Night, Among the Burning Flowers. I think that's a perfectly good order to read it in. Then there's chronological order, which for me, I would only recommend chronological order if A, you really hate spoilers, because it's the only way to not know about character deaths in advance, or if you are already very familiar with epic fantasy, because I think that if you're coming from a subgenre or you're not used to fantasy, A Day of Fallen Night is going to be a really hard one to start with, because that's the chronologically furthest back. It's also the longest book, it has the most characters, it is the most politically complex, the most places to keep track of, a lot of names, a lot of dates. So I think that one's going to be a tough starting point maybe if it's your first dive into fantasy. So that order, if you want, is A Day of Fallen Night, Priory of the Orange Tree. A Day of Fallen Night, Among the Burning Flowers, the Priory of the Orange Tree. And then the last order I recommend is accessible order, which starts with Among the Burning Flowers, go to Priory of the Orange Tree, and then A Day of Fallen Night. I think that one for me is good, again, if you're not used to fantasy, or you might be coming from just reading shorter books in general, because Among the Burning Flowers is so much shorter than the other two. So I think it's a good access point, and it's part of the reason I wrote it, was because I wanted people to have an easier option to start the series that isn't quite so intimidating. So again, that's a perfectly good way of reading it. You will know some things when you go into the Priory of the Orange Tree that make it a little more tragic, perhaps. For me, I don't think spoilers are always inherently a bad thing, which is probably controversial, because I remember when I used to tweet, you know, about Game of Thrones, and people would be like, oh, it's a spoiler, and I don't always think they're bad. I think that sometimes if you know something in advance, there's a sort of dramatic irony to it, where you know something that the characters don't. I think it can add this layer of tragedy and emotion. So yeah, I think it just depends on the kind of reader you are and how you feel, really. Technically, you can read it in any order, just pick whichever one sounds most interesting.
So you did plan for it to be shorter.
Mm-hmm.
Did that change your approach to writing it and how you paced the story? Did you find there were any surprising challenges or benefits intending to write a shorter book?
It was originally supposed to be even shorter. It was supposed to be a sort of very slim novella of about 10 to 15,000 words. But then when I pitched my idea to my publisher, they were really keen on it and they wanted me to write something just a little bit longer. So technically it goes above novella length now. I think it's about 45 to 50,000 words and novella is 40,000. I think it was definitely eye-opening to realise that that's the length of the book I wrote. A lot of authors just write that as their yearly general book that they write, and it was quite shocking to me how quickly I was able to do it. And I was like, oh, I had no idea it was this, not easy per se, but that I can just write a short book in a relatively short amount of time, because normally they're big projects that take me multiple years. So it was a nice benefit, I suppose, to be able to work on something that just took a bit less time to get out. I liked having the tighter focus. So the other Roots of Chaos books go to multiple countries, they've got more narrators, there's just a lot more of the world covered. This one is only in 2 countries, and that was quite nice because I was able to go into those 2 countries in a bit more depth. I also kept it to 3 storytellers rather than 4, and there's a particular focus on one of them who is present throughout the whole narrative, whereas the other 2 are kind of like satellite narrators around her. So that allowed me again to do a bit more deep character work rather than spreading it out further. So yeah, there were definitely advantages to it. I mean, there were times when I wanted to write more. I always want to go further and discover more of the world. But yeah, I know I'm writing more Roots of Chaos books. So this was a nice, shorter adventure.
Power, religion, politics, identity, purpose. How do you go about handling such complex themes?
Oh, that's a huge question.
Yeah.
Yeah, there are always themes I particularly want to explore in each book. So with A Day of Fallen Night, for example, I really wanted to go into the subject of motherhood and to look at women who did want to be mothers, women who didn't want to be mothers, women who had to become mothers against their will. So sometimes I will really sit down and think, what does each character bring to this theme? What does their perspective change about that? This one I was interested in looking at controlling parent figures. I was interested again in the different layering of religion. We have this religion called Virtuedom, which is a sort of stand-in for Christianity, and then you have older indigenous religions that are more similar to paganism, and I went into quite a lot of detail about that in this one. But yeah, I mean, it depends on the book. There's many different ways that you can handle the same theme, so yeah.
Prior to this, I was chatting to our events team who were singing your praises about past events that you've done and how interactive you are with readers. Obviously, you've got quite a few dates coming up with us. Mm-hmm. Are there any questions you're hoping to get from readers and things you're wanting to discuss with them?
I love the questions I get from my readers. I have a really, really engaged readership, and it's always so lovely to hear different takes on my story, especially when I haven't necessarily thought of it myself. It's really nice to hear from people who are bringing their own perspective to it. I'm willing to talk about anything, really. I mean, I like fun questions about dragons. I like deeper questions about religion. It's just, yeah, anything, really.
What is next in the Roots of Chaos series? Do you have an idea of how many more books you want to add to it, or who the next books might focus on?
Yes, so I would like to write at least 3 more main instalments, or at least 2, but preferably 3. One of them would be a sequel to The Priory of the Orange Tree, which I know that's the one that everyone wants me to write. Every time I write a new Roots of Chaos book, people are like, but when's the sequel coming? And I'm just being annoying at this point by going back to write prequels. But the thing is, I really am convinced that a sequel would be stronger if I reveal more things in the prequels first. So I'm being quite stubborn and keep working on my prequels. So I would like to write a prequel about Caliber and Neporo and Clearlind, who are these 3 immortal women who are really important to the lore of the Roots of Chaos world. So definitely one about them. Theoretically, I would like to write a sequel to A Day of Fallen Night, which would be the first book that looked at the Age of Starlight. So the Priory of the Orange Tree and A Day of Fallen Night are both set in ages of fire, where fire magic is chaotic and it produces fire-breathing dragons. But we haven't seen an Age of Starlight yet, which is when the water dragons become more chaotic. And I think that would be really interesting to explore that period, just to kind of really establish the stakes of this world and what happens when both kinds of magic go out of control. And yeah, so then the sequel, so at least 3. I think it'd be nice to write some shorter projects as well that focus in a bit more tightly on certain characters. I'd love to do one about Bardholt, who is the father of Glorian from A Day of Fallen Night, and he has a really interesting backstory, so I'd love to do a book about him.
This is quite specific, but with the sequel to Priory of the Orange Tree, would that be picking up instantly after or 10 years in the future?
I think probably a few years down the line, I might imagine that perhaps Ede and Sabran have to meet before the 10-year kind of anniversary that they gave. So I think a few years down the line, not necessarily a full decade, I would imagine.
I did think the 10-year wait was quite brutal.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, it will be literally 10 years before we get the sequel, probably, knowing my writing speed.
Could you give us a spoiler-free sentence that summarises Among the Burning Flowers?
It is about a princess who has been confined to a tower by her father for most of her life, and then she learns that there are worse things than her father out there, maybe.